Yo, what's going on guys, it's Cynical and welcome back to another video. Today for you guys, I wanted to talk about Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, as the demo of the game recently dropped. Although of course last year we had two trial versions that came out, so that of course Team Ninja could garner some feedback on exactly how players were finding the game. This demo is the very early start portion of the game itself, and then for when the full game releases next week, you're able to transfer over your demo progress. So it's essentially the first slice of the game. I ended up releasing a video last year talking about my impressions on Stranger of Paradise, and in this video I'm not going to go over all of the fundamentals as to exactly how the game works. If you want a video like that, be sure to check out my very first early review of the game that came out last year. That'll be in the description down below. But this version that we're looking at here today is more closer to that of the finalized version. It essentially is. No doubt the full game will end up receiving a patch of sorts around launch. But what we're looking at right here is basically the finalized build of Final Fantasy Origin. And if you guys ended up playing the trial versions that came out last year, you'll know that there were some things that were a little bit sticky, but I think all in all, the reception towards this game was actually pretty well taken, in the sense of it is using that Nioh DNA, that Nioh formula known from Team Ninja, infusing into Final Fantasy with Final Fantasy elements. It honestly works really well. However though, one of the big complaints I guess you'd probably come across was certainly the visuals and even sometimes the performance of the game. One of my biggest gripes were definitely the visuals of the game. It had this really sort of strong type early PS4, maybe even possibly PS3 type feel to the game itself. And what I am happy to say is, in this sort of more finalized version, it does feel as if the visuals have been slightly refined a bit, at least when we look towards Chaos Palace, which was the area that you got to explore in the trial, and you get to also explore it here in the demo. It had this really ugly, I believe like sort of greeny color palette filter going on, and that has been toned down a lot. I think just in general too, the visuals of the game have slightly improved. The lighting was really bad in the trial versions and has been further improved here. You are able to manually increase the brightness, which is nice, but yeah, in that trial version, it was just really hard to sometimes see exactly what you were doing, considering that a lot of the environments throughout this game, from what we've seen, are quite dark lit. So if we still had that lighting issue, it would be a continual problem for the level design in which this game offers, but it has been improved. That's good. On top of that too, performance has also been improved as well. There were a lot of stutters going on in those trial versions, and here in this finalized demo version, it seems like there are less stutters, though I won't say it's absolutely stutter free or anything like that. And certainly when there is a lot of stuff going on screen, there can be some frame drops, but for the most part, when you are playing in performance mode, as there is both resolution and performance mode, you should find yourself pretty much always getting that 60 frames per second. I'd also like to say too that I am playing on PlayStation 5, so all of the footage that you guys are seeing is performance mode, PS5. One of the negatives that I still have to bring up though is certainly the visuals, because while yes, they have been slightly refined a little bit, and that sort of hideous greeny filter, grungy filter that's going on in specifically the Chaos Palace area has been lifted, which is sort of nice, toned down I guess. The visuals still are not a strong point here in Stranger of Paradise. I'd even go as far to say that, like, when looking at even Nioh or Nioh 2, those games actually look better than what we've got going on here with Stranger of Paradise, which is interesting because Stranger of Paradise is using the same engine, it's using the same framework as Nioh, so very interesting to see that it doesn't really shine through that well in comparison to something like Nioh. But yeah, man, I don't know, in some of the cutscenes and stuff, like the models of the characters, and especially with the lip syncing and whatnot, look just completely off. Other cutscenes don't look as bad, which is a little bit jarring sometimes, and especially like paying attention to backgrounds in certain cutscenes. There's this one cutscene when the gang is leaving Cornelia and they're going across a bridge, and if you just notice into like the forests in the background, with the water and stuff, it just doesn't look good. But what I will say is this is not game breaking at all. This is not the deal breaker for the game, because the gameplay is the game's core and it is a lot of fun. You will especially notice though the bad visuals when playing on performance mode, and this is generally the sacrifice that you have to make when playing on a performance mode, is that the visuals will be less but the performance will be a lot better, right? But specifically, Stranger of Paradise's performance mode is really jarring, with the anti-aliasing being just horrible and the resolution brought down an immeasurable amount. Even though looking at resolution mode, which I just really don't recommend playing on for a game like this, being an action RPG, Dark Souls-y type game, you'll really want to get the best performance possible, right? So the higher the frame rate, the better. But even when playing in resolution mode, it sort of shines through even more, just kind of how bad the visuals are. Another complaint was certainly the party members. So the party member system just didn't really exist at all in the trial. You were able to equip your party members with different equipment, but really that's about it. In the sense of gameplay, there was nothing there to like issue your party members commands or anything like that. So now finally in the demo, you can press left or right on the D-pad and that will correspond to a different party member, and they'll unleash a flurry of different attacks. It's not like you can order them to do a certain magic or something in that sense, but depending on what they are equipped with and what class they're under, they will do different attacks, which are generally quite powerful when you activate them on the D-pad. This is a massive step up, and I can even tell within the AI of the party members, it's just a lot better with them dodging more frequently, attacking at the right time more frequently, not just running into attacks and being meat shields. This was certainly apparent in the trial, and it has been utterly refined here in the final game. So big appreciate towards that, and nice that you can actually utilize them now. Let's talk about the actual good stuff, and that being the story, on top of that, the gameplay. So the gameplay, what is this? This is essentially Final Fantasy Dark Souls. As I said, it's coming from Team Ninja, that is responsible for Nioh and Nioh 2, which in essence is a samurai Souls game. Nioh has always been known as probably the most fast-paced Souls game out of the variety of different Souls games in the genre, and that shines through even more so here with Stranger of Paradise. It's very fast-paced in comparison to something like Dark Souls or Demon's Souls, Bloodborne, which I personally find to be the most fast-paced out of the FromSoft Souls games. Yeah, Final Fantasy Origin is quick, and infusing that Nioh DNA into Final Fantasy has worked extremely well. We have the job system from most Final Fantasy games, so you've got your mage, black mage, red mage, you got your swordsman, your ronin, your samurai, your berserker, your marauder. A lot of those familiar Final Fantasy jobs are here, and they work as the different classes. There's a lot of classes in this game, and that's going to determine your playstyle. Each class has a different set of abilities and things to utilize, and the game can be quite technical. With each different class comes a different set of abilities. Classes also have advanced jobs, which then introduce more abilities to use whilst in the class itself. But in the technical side of things, yes, you do have your R1 attacks, which you can hold down for charge up attacks. R2 is then used for your abilities that pertain to that of course, the class or job you're using at the time. And it's up to you exactly as to how you want to customize that. So you'll always have an ability bound to R2, but as you begin your combo, that R2 ability will change. It's up to you to customize what exactly the combo R2 or combo R2 or combo R2 ability will be. You can also integrate the left analog stick into the combo as well by either pressing forward on the left analog stick as you're comboing, or back will result in a different type of attack, and an ability can also be bound to these inputs too. So just from playing the very first 3 missions of the game, with being able to try out a numerous amount of different classes, really goes to show how much tech is in the combat system of this game. At times, honestly, it can be a little bit overwhelming, but I'm sure as the more you play, the more you'll get used to the system itself. Naturally, like anything, right? You're also able to switch between 2 different jobs at once on the fly by pressing triangle. So switching between a mage type class to that of a melee type class, comes in really handy if of course you need to, say, attack an enemy from a distance by using spells like Fire, Blizzard, Quake, and then getting up close and personal by whipping out your Marauder class. The seamless flow of going between two different playstyles is really nice. There is no stamina bar in this game, so do not worry about having to manage a stamina resource. You can dodge, run, sprint, do whatever you want to your heart's content. I think this helps with the whole flow of how this game is a lot more fast-paced compared to other Souls games. There is of course a guard mechanic with L1, however there is a break gauge which applies to both yourself as well as your enemies. If that break gauge depletes, of course your guard is broken and you are vulnerable for a certain amount of time, so don't break the break gauge. If you break the enemy's break gauge, you are then able to pull off an execution move with Circle, which is always brutal. It usually involves some sort of breaking of the neck, ripping off the head, snapping of the jaw. You get the idea. It's pretty brutal. A unique thing to this though is Soul Shield. By pressing circle, you can interrupt an enemy's attack. What's really cool about this though is for enemy attacks that appear on the indicator as purple, these are certain abilities that you can actually absorb with Soul Shield. Once you've absorbed the enemy's ability, you can then use that ability by pressing square a certain amount of times. Soul Shield is a little bit risky though, because if you fail with Soul Shield, your break gauge is going to be broken instantaneously, leaving you vulnerable for the masses. All of that, you can tell there's a lot of depth in this game, on top of the Nioh armoring system with being able to switch in and out your different equipment with headpieces, chest pieces, gloves, shoes, pants, all of which have different stats and also pertain to specific sorts of jobs, which if you're wearing certain things while equipped with a certain job, it's going to give you affinity bonus, which can then further unlock more bonuses. There's a lot to take in here. There's a lot of food when it comes to the gameplay department of this game. Now, I did say that this is a Dark Souls genre type of game, right? But if you are the sort of person that is deterred by these types of games, don't be so much deterred by Final Fantasy Stranger of Paradise. Mainly because this would have to be in the more easier category of Souls games compared to what you know and hear from, obviously, the genre itself. What's nice is there are difficulty options, and Square Enix have labeled this as, of course, being an action RPG, but that everyone can experience, and that's hence the reason why there are difficulty options. There are three. There is story, there is action, and there's hard. So if you don't want that grueling experience of having to try again until you have the enemy's attack pattern down on pat, then don't worry, there's a story mode difficulty there so that anyone can jump in and enjoy this experience. This footage is all captured with action mode enabled, but I did try a little bit of hard mode out, and it is sort of more so reminiscent of the difficulty that you might find in something like Nioh, or leaning more towards something like, of course, the Souls games. But even looking at action, you are still going to have to be on your feet. You're going to have to be aware of who's attacking, what's attacking, when to dodge, when to guard, when to attack, and when it comes to boss fights, yes, there is that whole memorizing the attack pattern thing. So it's quite nice. This game does cater towards those who are familiar with Souls games. If you want that experience, you can get that experience, or for people that just want to play this and enjoy the story and have a little action on the side, that story mode difficulty is there for you. I highly appreciate this. Most Souls games generally have a punishment for dying, which is losing all of your accumulated XP. In this game, the XP is automatically given to the class that you're using in the moment of defeating an enemy, and once the class is finally leveled up, you unlock skill points, which can then be used in the class's skill tree. So there's no real punishment of dying in this game. You just simply respawn back to your last touched cube spot, which is this game's version of bonfires or shrines. The story in which is going on here is incredibly intriguing. So at first we thought that this was going to be some kind of retelling of Final Fantasy 1. To a certain degree it sort of is. It has the Final Fantasy 1 location and world going on along with its characters. But there's something more going on here, specifically looking at the main protagonists of Jed, Ash, and Jack, and the title of the game being Stranger of Paradise. It would seem like these characters are literally dimension travelers, and in the sense of what the dimensions are, I believe that these are the different Final Fantasy worlds, with I think the Final Fantasy 1 world being probably the primary of which. It looks like throughout the game you're going to be able to jump into other Final Fantasy worlds, as we have seen footage of dungeons from Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy XIV. Even in some of the lore orbs that you can collect in the missions, it talks about dimension hopping and dimensions, so this seems like a multiverse Final Fantasy game. I think that much is apparent straight off the bat because you already see the main protagonists wearing clothing from definitely not the era that you're in, being Final Fantasy 1's era, being all medieval and fantasy-esque. Ash is out here wearing like Nike Air Forces, so yeah, something strange is going on. On top of that too, Jack has a smartphone with earbuds, he listens to music, and as you also do progress through some of these missions, they talk about how some of the places they're going to do feel familiar to them. Some of the blurbs and captions that we've seen towards the advertisement of this game mentions how their memories have been buried deep within inside of their hearts, so it seems like these guys are suffering from some kind of amnesia, which possibly might be some direct result of this dimension hopping that is going on. Now, I don't want to talk about the whole Jack and Chaos thing, just for people that don't want to be spoiled per se, but there's already a theory out there which looks like, yeah, that's probably what is going to happen, which likely coincides with this whole dimension hopping thing going on and the loss of memories. But the story in itself is really interesting because it seems like this game is this multiverse of Final Fantasy, and with the name of this game being Final Fantasy Origin, it quite possibly really is the origin of all Final Fantasies. A lot of what the hell is going on, I absolutely love that, and also like the personality of especially Jack, he's carrying the whole thing. He's just that grungy, edgy, sort of middle-aged dude who ain't putting up with no shit. This cutscene right here is absolutely godlike and gives a perfect example of this character.
I offered myself to the darkness and prayed to become chaos, hoping some band of heroes would defeat me, and thus bring an end to this empty dream.
Bullshit.
Yeah, I can't wait to experience more of that. So personally, I'm really looking forward to playing the full game when it comes out next week. I think this is something special, and although, yeah, there's some stickiness there with some of the performance as well as the visuals, these could potentially be fixed with a future patch. When looking at the visuals, I don't think that's something that's going to change overly too much. I do hope anti-aliasing is something that does come into play. It really doesn't take away too much from the experience itself. The environments look fine enough for me to enjoy it, and because the gameplay carries this game so hard, I honestly do feel as if Stranger of Paradise is going to be one of those hidden gem underrated Square Enix games. As Square Enix have explained, this certainly is a bold new take on Final Fantasy, with the darker atmosphere going on and the sort of Dark Souls genre being infused into which is really quite neat, and I think this is sort of the refreshing breath of air that we've needed, sort of infused into Final Fantasy for quite some time now. I know Final Fantasy 16 is finally going to be changing things up, and also sort of going back to its roots with returning to the high fantasy era of things, and Stranger of Paradise kind of does that, but more with that edgier tone going on, infusing all areas and corners of Final Fantasy right there into the mix. Like, dudes are swearing out here, there's blood, especially the execution attacks are absolutely gnarly. You really feel powerful pulling these off, and some of them are completely brutal. So personally, I'm really looking forward to Stranger of Paradise. I highly recommend that you guys try it out for yourselves. The demo is available as of right now for PS4, PS5, and Xbox, and as I mentioned, you're able to transfer your progress into the full game if, of course, you decide to make the move. Quick tip too, in case you guys don't know, this game is co-op, so you can play 3-player co-op if in case you are struggling at a certain point in the game and start mashing up baddies with your friends. However guys, that's all for today. Just thought I would talk further more about SOP before it releases next week. I've been Cynical, hope you're having a fantastic day, and I'll catch you dudes in the next one. Peace.